Hey everyone, welcome to Ultra Life Today. We have a very special treat for you today. This is the 2.0 version, the return visit of Dr. Royce Bargas of Bargas Wellness. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Josh Bellew.
I'm the other guy, Adam Payne, and I'm actually really excited to have Dr. Vargas back with us today. It's been about a year. Has it been that long?
It's
about 6 months.
January, yeah. And just to
7
reference that, episode number 45, if you didn't have the opportunity to get into the first two segments of our interview with Dr. Royce Bargas way back in January, you do want to revisit those. You want to share them with your friends. I've actually shared them with some people in my world that have recently had some cardiac events, and I know it's a huge blessing to them to hear what I like to say about Royce is she's very circumspect, she's practical, she's intense. She tells you you can do the work, but guess what? She'll also tell you you can get well. And I love that. She makes that promise because she knows it's a partnership between her and you to do your work, and she's going to get you there. Dr. Royce Bargas, she is a electrophysiologist. She's a doctor of osteopathy. She's board certified in cardiology, and she has a functional medicine discipline as well. And it's a joy to welcome you once again, Dr. Bargas, to the broadcast.
Thank you, Josh and Adam. I'm honored to be back.
So let's just do kind of a recap for everybody, because you're last time you were with us, you shared kind of your life's journey, how you were you got into electrocardiology, kind of becoming the expert or an expert in the electrical functionality of the heart. And then there was a transition moment, and you found that there was a whole new world of medicine that's functional medicine. Maybe just recap for us what that journey was like.
And especially the part where it was a super long journey. It was a hard journey. You were determined, you were persistent, and then you became disillusioned with what you thought was going to be your life work in this world of electrophysiology, which turned out to be glutted with hundreds of electrophysiologists right when you graduated?
Yes. I'm not really sure how to short recap it, but yeah, 12 to 16 years of medical training into the electrophysiology profession. Came out of fellowship into employment, which basically meant that a hospital controlled my life and how I practiced medicine. That was not really my mojo, and so I did that for about 6 years and became more and more disheartened. So I left employment and went into private practice, and through that practice and that journey, I discovered functional medicine, was taught about functional medicine, and became passionate with it. It really is the true medicine and why I had gone into medicine in the first place. So then I began my, about 3-year certification journey with the Institute for Functional Medicine. And now I have the only truly integrative cardiology practice in the state of Oklahoma.
Yeah, I know. It's really phenomenal to have that resource here. I've been sending people your way, people that
Thank you.
I won't name names for confidentiality purposes.
Yeah. I'm actually trying to send people to you from out of state just to do video work with you because they don't know anyone like you where they are.
We are few and far between, for sure.
So, at the normal aging human body, so I actually, I worked in an area of cardiology that's interfaces with rheumatology. I had a grant with the American College of Rheumatology, one of the biggest grants with the president of the American College of Rheumatology. Her name is escaping me right now. And we were looking at how rheumatoid arthritis affected cardiovascular disease. And we were measuring hundreds, if not a couple thousand patients, looking at the intermedial thickness of the carotid artery and looking at calcification scores of the heart, and then looking at biomarkers of inflammation and cardiovascular activity to see if we could understand the specific biomarkers and the specific morbidity that comes with anybody that has rheumatoid arthritis and how it affects the cardiovascular system.
And you learned some horrifying things, some statistics that you threw out to me were so scary.
Oh my gosh. I mean, in general, if you have rheumatoid arthritis, your life expectancy is cut by 7 years. Just fact, out the door, you're going to die 7 years earlier than everybody else, statistically speaking.
Wow.
And one of the biggest contributors to that is how inflammation leaks out of the joints and actually affects everything in the human body, so that these activated cytokines don't just stay in the synovium and around the joint. They're expressed by cells. They're called, all these cells are calling 911 saying, send the army. And those signals actually leak out. And when we were able to see how profoundly cardiovascular tissue was affected by what we called at that point subclinical inflammation, and how it then affected not only the heart, but the arterial supply, the venous supply, profoundly. It created just a profound respect for me, how important it is for us to, as not just in the last 20 years of our life, to focus on our cardiovascular health, but to think about it earlier in life.
Preemptive strike,
absolutely, absolutely. And inflammation in general, I mean, we could have a whole podcast about that. It's, it affects the entire body. And I would argue that it probably isn't inflammation leaking out of the joints and getting into the cardiovascular system, but that it's systemic inflammation in general that causes symptoms of rheumatoid and cardiovascular disease and disease in every organ, and quite frankly, cancer. Inflammation is bad. It affects everything. It is the root cause of many, many things. And it's best to stamp it out as early as possible.
Yeah,
we call it inflammaging now in the world of functional medicine.
That's
beautiful term.
There's a key opinion leader in the American College of Nutrition. A guy named Dr. Shailesh Kaushal. Have you heard of him? He's a really interesting guy. He's like the key opinion leader of key opinion leaders. He gathers the KOLs together to talk about different things. One of the things that he was, when we had him here talking about this, he said, Adam, in his beautiful East Indian accent, inflammation is responsible for 99% of human disease.
I agree.
But
you
we
always have to find the inflammation if you're going to look for the root cause. What is causing the inflammation?
But we need it. I mean, without the inflammation system, we got to live in a bubble, right?
100%.
It's how athletes go through that unique cycle of inflammation to be able to get better and better and better.
That's right. It does strengthen you, but in moderation.
Yeah. So can you recap for us, because you have this unique and beautiful practice. You have this side of your practice that is very much for an individual that is only familiar with conventional medicine and that conventional paradigm. You have what we kind of deemed on the last podcast, the insurance side of your practice, where you practice cardiology in a way that most people would at least find palatable and they understand at least some level of it. But then Adam asked you the question last time, the difference between functional and integrative, and within your discipline, the courses that you took over 3 years, can you remind us what those, I think, was it 6 points of integrative medicine?
Wasn't it 7?
The stool. Okay, 7? Okay.
7.
Okay,
Yeah.
Can you remind us of that, and then kind of tell our audience
and
how that might take someone that comes to you that's got this traditional facing understanding of how they integrate with their doctor, and then how you can help shift them towards something that's much more preemptive strike, preventive.
Yeah, and then I want to get back to this maybe an oversimplification idea. I'm sure you have, if you were going to leave people today with, hey, these are the 3 things you want to consider for your health, right, and do for your general cardiovascular health in terms of managing inflammation. I want to get back to that later, but please address Josh's question, if you don't mind.
Okay, so I think you're asking about the 7 pillars of functional medicine,
That's
or the
right.
7 systems, or the 7 corners of the matrix.
Mm-hmm.
So in the conventional world, like Adam, you were talking about how you were kind of surprised how rheumatology somehow then overlapped with cardiology.
Right.
And you're only surprised because in the conventional world, they're so separate. I mean, how can your joints have anything to do with your arteries, right? But as we learn in osteopathic school, the body is a unit, everything's interconnected, everything's interrelated, and that's what functional medicine truly is understanding the systems of the body in a different construct than conventional medicine, where we have to separate out the joints from the heart, from the kidney, from the lung. And I mean, that is all driven by the payer source. Like, how are we going to get paid? And insurance. Where functional medicine really does look at the body as a whole. And so we look at things like your ability to detoxify, which we call biotransformation, your mitochondrial health, which your mitochondria build every molecule of ATP that is the energy currency of the body. And so much of our world destroys the mitochondria. And in the conventional world, the only time you ever hear about mitochondria are these like 1 in a million super rare mitochondrial disorders. We look at assimilation, our ability to get our nutrients from our environment and what we eat. We look at transport, like how are those nutrients and the building blocks and everything we need transported around the body. We look at structure, which isn't just your bones and your muscles, but your whole fascia and the entire structural system that brings it all together. We look at communication, which is really sort of likened to the endocrinology system, because it's really how does one system communicate with another, and it's through hormones. And so hormone
the cytokines and the chemokines and all that stuff, right?
I think, was that 7?
It was 7.
It was 7.
You did it.
Oh, yeah.
Ding, 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 ding. Hold the calls. We have a winner, right?
So, I mean, I'm just listening to that. It's fascinating, because each one of those you're talking about the human body as a whole living unit, not as separate operating organ systems.
Yeah, and as you're mentioning those, I literally see how one thing being off here creates this cascade and domino effect of all these other things. And so how does one go about balancing these 7 things? Can you actually put your finger sometimes on one thing and then have it affect multiple things to make them better?
Yes, and so
that's exciting.
That's kind of how functional medicine works, is working through those 7 pillars of the matrix and finding the deficiencies and correcting abnormalities in each of them, and understanding that one can totally affect another. And then we didn't mention is in the center of the matrix is our psychological, mental, and spiritual health. And that really, like chronic stress, talk about a source of inflammation, it affects every single area of the matrix. And then if you have leaky gut, that's not in the center of the matrix, but leaky gut causes leaky brain, which then leads to depression, anxiety, ADHD, that sort of thing. And then, there's psychological trauma. So many people have trauma even from birth and early childhood, and it's a really difficult, destructive world we live in. And that trauma can cause leaky gut later in life, or cause you to have chronic ankle pain because of this trauma you suffered as a child that you never really dealt with and got the trauma out of your system. And so everything is so
is that a separate pillar? I mean, kind of that's really talking about the psychological, social, spiritual part of our existence.
It's like the foundation of functional medicine. The matrix is kind of like this hexagon, and in the center of the matrix is this 3-legged stool. Psychological, mental, spiritual.
Okay, here we go. Great segue, because I really want to plumb the depths of this.
Wow.
So we're going to be right back. This is Ultra Life Today. I'm Josh Bellew. We're here with Dr. Royce Bargas, and I've got
Adam Payne down here. Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Our mission is to take nature's most beloved botanicals and enhance them with our liquid protein scaffold technology. This helps it reach your cells faster and better. With exponentially enhanced bioavailability, you'll feel better every day. Ultra Botanica, the feel-good curcumin.
Welcome back to Ultra Life Today. We are here with Dr. Royce Bargas. You probably know how you would be able to connect with Dr. Royce Bargas. She has a really cool practice in Edmond, Oklahoma, but she does telemedicine like other people do all over the United States. The best way to get a hold of her is bargaswellness.com. That's BARGAS wellness.com. She'll do a discovery call, 10 minutes free, to kind of have a meet and greet with you and kind of answer some questions so that you can know that you can trust this lady with your health journey and to take you from point A, where you are now, which is probably not good, into that place of homeostasis and wellness. So again, bargaswellness.com.
Hey, Josh,
And,
that's quite a mouthful that you're just putting out there.
Yeah, it is.
And
It
quite a big
is. Yeah.
promise that Dr. Bargas can deliver
Well,
on.
you know, if you go to her website, she hits you in the face basically with, if you come to me and you do the work, we're going to make you well. Wow, I love that. She throws down the gauntlet. So
So
I
do you
love
come?
it.
Do you, I got to imagine.
And by the way,
you-
Dr. Royce Bargas and Adam Payne on
yeah,
the
yeah,
end
yeah.
here.
Dr. Bargas, I got to imagine you have this these tools that you kind of use to map out the 7 pillars for the patients, and maybe you don't, maybe it's all in your head. But how do you? So somebody's coming in and they have issues. Where do you start?
Well, the history taking in functional medicine is the most comprehensive you would ever see. My patients are always like, "What? I have to fill out this 22-page document?" But
And that's just the start, right?
That's just the gathering
Yeah, and behind
of
the scenes, you're
information.
spending 4
And
hours reviewing that, right?
I'm spending many hours reviewing it, and we also obtain tons of prior evaluation medical records on the conventional side, or if they've ever had functional testing. I review all of that. And so a big part of functional medicine when I meet somebody is to tell them their story. And so I have to have spent all this time in their history to kind of summarize all that for them in the clinic and tell them, because especially in the conventional world, people have an angiogram and get a stent and they don't even know what happened. And so, you know, or they have heart failure. Super common that people have heart failure and they don't, nobody's even said the term heart failure or explained to them what does that even mean. And so I basically, you know, in the first hour that I spend with somebody, I'm conducting a very comprehensive nutritional exam, and a full physical exam that includes a nutritional exam, and then I'm summarizing their life story as I see it and have them fill in gaps that have been lacking through my history taking. And then sometimes in the first hour, our first visit, I don't even get an opportunity to tell them what I think where the problems are and where we're going. That's all typed up in a different document after they leave, because some people's history is really complicated, and it's really important to tell them their story so that they can understand how I see them as a whole person and how things in their life have gotten them to where they are, and things that they might think are completely unrelated are contributing to where they are. And it's also important
That's
to understand.
a huge statement.
Yeah, if you've had chronic GI issues since you were 7 and you're 70, you are not going to get better in a week. You know,
Right.
and people need to
Right.
understand it can be a very long journey back to health if you have been sick your whole life.
But it's possible.
So
100%.
You see it, yes.
Yep.
I'm imagining the medical history, and then you have test to get more information.
I do a lot of testing. I think that might be a little overboard because I also.
Well, compared to what normally you go in, you do a CBC with the doctor or maybe some other things. My sense is that you do a lot more.
Yes, my testing is much more comprehensive, but I also pace myself and the patient, because with every very advanced comprehensive functional test I do, there come a lot of protocol changes and a lot of recommendations. And so what I really try to stay away from, and this comes from experience of things not going well, is doing 3 different humongous tests and then there are 100 changes a person has to make. And I only have an hour, which, quite frankly, is over 10 times longer than any other physician spends with their patients. Mm-hmm. But it's also important that I interpret all of these results. What does this mean, and how did we get here, and where are we going? And I can only I can only cover one test, I've discovered.
Royce, is there one or two tests for an individual that's coming to you with a cardiology issue? Is there one or two tests for you that are kind of almost out of the chute you always do, because that gives you at least somewhat of a broader look rather than just like pinpointing, like a high-powered rifle? Is that common for you or not necessarily?
Yes, it's not a test. It's one panel. So I do advanced cardiometabolic testing, and it's probably one of the most common things I do in my practice. And so that's fractionation of lipids. So that's doing NMR of your lipids and really breaking down your, quote, bad cholesterol particles and seeing what those look like. Checking your fatty acid balance, looking at your omega-6 to 3 ratio, which is a direct correlate to inflammation in the body. I look at several inflammatory markers that tell me about systemic inflammation, vascular inflammation. I look at oxidation. I do a battery of tests to look at your metabolic health. And
how exciting!
Some hormones. Yes,
I mean, you're like
test.
You're getting this immense, beautiful palette of information, and I'm sure each test is telling you a story about where. I mean, if it's out of balance this way, you're like, that's interesting, but it could be out of balance that way. Are there more similarities in what you're seeing, or is it quite variable when you end up testing people?
Oh, it's highly variable, and interesting. Like some of the people that I think would be the most inflamed, for whatever reason, they're not by the markers that I test. I firmly believe that there's actually inflammation that goes on that we don't even know how to look for yet.
So I want to frame something up for viewers. What you mentioned just now, you went through this long list, but does that fall under that one panel that you say is something you always do? So
sort of. Yeah.
Okay, because here's what I want to say. Some of these tests, our viewers are so used to the insurance pay thing, $5 copay, no copay, $10 copay. But imagine being able to learn what Dr. Royce Bargas just spoke about, and would a test like that be $500, $400, $300 out of pocket? What might it cost someone to do that particular?
That panel, with some reproductive hormones thrown in, I think I also do a cholesterol balance panel, which tells me do people produce or absorb too much cholesterol, which can be super helpful when it comes to management.
I didn't even know that you could look at that.
Yeah,
Amazing.
I know. It's very cool. So that whole panel, if I recall correctly, cash pay through my office is under $800.
Okay, so I mean, I just want to put that in perspective. You may have lived all your life. Now you're getting older, like I am. I'm not going to put Adam or Royce in that.
I'm getting older too, Josh. Don't leave me out of this.
Okay, but all of a sudden you realize you've never actually taken a deep dive into your health, your heart, which, as we kind of know, when you talk about almost any physician, they'll generally go, yeah, if your heart's like messing up, you're kind of screwed, pardon my French. And so think about being able to spend that amount of money to then have this unique opportunity for a comprehensive roadmap to longevity, to health, to avoiding a cardiac event, to avoid being in the hospital and having the people coming around and trying to serve you and figure out what do we do now with mom, dad, brother, sister. That's special because I've cared for family members of mine on and off now for the last 18 to 20 years. And I'm here to tell you, it would have been fantastic if they had gone to see someone and they would have gladly taken that $700, $800, or $1,000 to pay for something that would have allowed them to still be around, hanging out with me, my children, my grandkids today.
Well, you're really putting it in perspective, aren't you, Josh?
But it is. I've lived this now for 18 to 20 years, caring for individuals that needed me to be with them hours a day and grocery shop for them and hold their hand and go pick up medications and all the things. Your wellness can absolutely create harmony in far-reaching circles of your family if you'll be proactive about it.
I feel like really everybody needs to do this. We all need to get the kind of wisdom that comes from this panel.
Absolutely.
So that we can understand and address any of these risk factors that we are predisposed to, or might not be. I mean, we can measure. You can go to a cardiologist, and you can go to a hospital and get a coronary calcium score, which is kind of a surrogate marker for how advanced your cardiovascular disease is. You can get an ultrasound of intermedial thickness of your carotid artery. Again, that's after the fact. Plaque is already there. But we don't, without the kind of testing that you're doing, we really don't know what's really going on with a patient. Is it going to fast progress? Is this bad inflammation? Is this bad a process that's going to end up with a lot of morbidity, which is bad stuff, right?
Yeah. Royce, from the panel that you just discussed, what are some of the things that you commonly learn about a patient relative to their cardiovascular health that can immediately allow you to say, you know what, here's some very proactive steps you can take, baby steps you can take immediately that are going to begin to slowly change the profile of your cardiovascular health?
I would say the presence of inflammation, be it systemic or vascular, metabolic disease is nearly 100% controllable with diet and nutrition.
Yep.
And I would say oxidation. People don't even know what that means.
What does it mean, Royce?
Well, oxidative stress is basically having more free radicals, these things that damage your cell membranes and DNA, which come from breathing the air in the world in which we live.
Environmental exposure, bad water,
food,
everything,
a
stress.
ton comes from food, eating, oxidized oils like the.
Yeah, all the seed oils.
Oh,
That
right.
could be a whole other conversation,
It
but
should be.
like seed oils have been promoted through even the American Heart Association. It's so
Right.
tragic, and
It is.
they're all 100% oxidized before you consume them. And
That's not
oxidized
good.
oil
Yeah.
in your body oxidizes your cholesterol, which is incredibly inflammatory and atherogenic and is the cause of cardiovascular disease. And nobody ever looks for it. And it's in my basic panel, I look for oxidation. And I can look for it in a couple of different ways, but you can very easily see, is the cholesterol oxidized?
Okay, with a couple of minutes left, you did mention diet, and I know that's always the thing that people go wah wah, and they kind of their head
Yet it's
lowers
the
down
most
because
important.
right. So one of the things I always say to people, and I don't know how, and again, you're one of those I think that you might say to people, you're on a forced march because you're walking down a road of death right now, and you might be that person. I always say to people, if you try to make them eat the apple all at once, you might even lose them as a patient because they're overwhelmed. So do you try to give them baby steps, and like would the first thing for you be, hey, you know what? If you can't pronounce that ingredient on the back of whatever this package is you bought, just don't buy that. In other words, processed food, or do you say just McDonald's needs to be a thing of the past? Don't ever go through another drive-through. How do you start people on that?
Yeah, give it. So we're ending our second segment here.
We've got about a minute to kind of set up into this.
We want to
next
leave
one.
people today with a teaser or maybe a couple of thoughts.
And something
What
practical.
can we do?
You can eat whole foods, mostly plants, although I would say that I do not ever advocate for a vegan diet. But again, if your great-grandparents couldn't recognize it, you should not be eating it. Fast food is not food. You need to eat whole foods from a nutrition standpoint. And yes, it's very hard to change it. And I would say, I kind of bow out of that conversation because I am not a health coach. I do have one of the only functionally certified health coaches in the state. So my job is to give you your meal plan and to tell you these are the things you can eat, these are the things you shouldn't eat. But as far as the baby steps to get to your end goal, that's where you need the hand-holding from a health coach who can very astutely identify what can you do. If you can't do all of this, what is the one tiny baby step you can do today and then next week and the week after that, and
Good for
slowly
you.
work
Good
yourself
for you.
into optimal nutrition for longevity.
So with baby steps, this has been Ultralife Today.
Yeah,
And, we've been talking to Dr. Royce Bargas about cardiovascular health, and we're going to come back next week. Josh, unless you had some other
We will.
thoughts.
Yeah, just contact Dr. Bargas at bargaswellness.com. That's B as in boy, ARGAS wellness.com.